The Steam Deck from Valve is an engineering marvel that makes the Nintendo Switch look like a child's toy. And chances are you already own a ton of games that'll work on this, including more demanding AAA titles that will actually run smoothly. It'll even run Windows if you really want. Of course, it's far from perfect, as you might expect from a first-generation device, but join me, James Bruce, with MUO Reviews as we take a deep dive into the Steam Deck and figure out if this is, in fact, the ultimate portable gaming device. From a design perspective, the Steam Deck comes in black and... nope, that's it, black. And it's surprisingly bigger than I expected, measuring around 30 centimeters long, 12 centimeters tall, and about 5 centimeters at the deepest section. It weighs also a heavy 670 grams. Included in the box is this very nice case to keep it in, which is perfectly molded to the shape. And also in the package you'll find a 45-watt USB-C charger. So the Steam Deck comes in 64GB eMMC models as well as 256 or 512GB NVMe SSD storage configurations, and otherwise the specs are nearly identical, though the 512GB model does have a matte screen while the other two are glossy. Now I opted for the mid-range 256GB model, coming in at around $449 and I've pretty much filled that up now, and that's mainly the fault of Horizon Zero Dawn, which weighs in about 70GB. So clearly the 64GB model would be extremely restrictive, not to mention the fact that it uses eMMC storage, which is very much a budget option and will load resources more slowly, though I don't have practical experience of that to tell you the difference. You can, however, expand your storage with a micro SD card, and if you have a truly massive game library that you want to keep loaded, then you can effectively treat those as swappable cartridges. But I'm happy to play through and just delete big games as needed. I don't need a massive library installed and ready to access at all times. It also has 16GB of RAM and a custom AMD Accelerated Processing Unit, or APU, based on the Zen 2 and RDNA 2 architectures. I won't dive deep into the technical details here, but Valve claims that performance is equal to a Ryzen 3000 CPU or a Radeon RX 6000 GPU, with a performance of approximately 1.6 teraflops. Now, for comparison's sake, the Nintendo Switch, when undocked, runs at a mere 0.4 teraflops, 1/4 the power of this, while the Xbox One sits at 1.3 and the PlayStation 4 at 1.8. So the Steam Deck is somewhere in between an Xbox One S and PS4 in terms of raw processing power. So a last-gen console, basically. But that's pretty incredible, and it means it can easily handle AAA, 3D, massive open-world titles, not just casual games like you would normally find on portable consoles. On the display front, there's a 7-inch touchscreen running at 1280 by 800, or pretty much 720p, and that's at a maximum brightness of 400 nits and a refresh rate of 60 Hz. Now, despite the portable nature of this device, the brightness I found was not quite enough to play outside, even as the sun was going down with a dark game like Gauntlet anyway. I just couldn't see what was going on. So if you are outside, you'll probably want to be shaded under a tree. So in terms of connectivity, you get Bluetooth 5.0, Wi-Fi up to AC speeds, and a full input-output USB-C capable port here, meaning that that single port can carry video to an external monitor, power back in to charge the device, a wired Ethernet networking coming in, audio out, as well as act as a generic USB host mode for other peripherals. So you can, if you want, connect this up via a dock to your gaming monitor, hook up your mouse and keyboard, or use an external Steam-supported Bluetooth controller and play exactly as if this were a gaming PC. Because it is a gaming PC. That's what's so insane about this. Finally, buttons and joypads and touchpads and all manner of input options. So as I said, there's a touchscreen. It's useful as a keyboard input and not much else. I wouldn't try to use it to play mouse-based games. There's 2 thumbsticks, a D-pad, and the standard 4-button ABXY. There's also 2 trackpads here with sort of delicate haptic feedback. You'll probably either love those or hate those. I do find myself in the latter camp, though. There's also triggers, of course, shoulder buttons, and surprisingly, even some configurable paddles, 2 on each side. And if that's not enough, there's even a 6-axis gyroscope, which allows you a little more fine control over the aiming. This can either be directly supported by certain games, or you can enable it anyway, but you might need to tweak it. The gyroscopic aiming, where fully supported anyway, is incredibly intuitive and far superior to just stick aiming. It's still not as good as a mouse, but it makes a huge difference. So let's talk software. There are many things about the Steam Deck that are amazing, but one of the most significant, in my opinion, is that if you already have a Steam account, chances are you already have hundreds, if not thousands, of games that you've picked up in various sales over the years and just been waiting for an opportunity to play. And a lot of those, not all mind, will be instantly playable without any fuss on the Steam Deck. This is all thanks to a software layer called Proton, which allows the core Linux system of SteamOS to run Windows software, a little like Wine, but in a way that's designed for high-performance gaming. While the Steam Deck hardware itself might be new, the software that's running on it has been worked on for a long time now, as Valve has wanted to push gamers towards a dedicated gaming Linux called SteamOS that they made. But the problem was always that you can't get developers to support a new OS unless you have gamers, and you can't get gamers to support a new OS unless you have games, and there's really no compelling reason to run Linux as a gamer otherwise. The Proton driver and Steam Deck is the answer to all of that, and hopefully we'll see a further push now to eradicate Windows from our lives forever. So first you have the question-marked games. These are unknown. No idea, might work, not tested, doesn't work, whatever. You can try it if you want, who knows. Then there's the no-go. Those won't work at all. Those with a yellow eye mark may work, and that's been tested, basically works, but may be awkward. Perhaps the control scheme isn't right, or some of the text is too small to read, or you need to use the on-screen keyboard to enter something. Basically, anything less than perfect, but pretty much confirmed playable. Anything with a green tick is sort of officially verified, meaning this works, awesome, no problems. You can also just look through the Great on Deck filter, which will show you everything in your library that will immediately work. Now, while you can install Windows on this and then get access to things like emulators or, well, any Windows apps, I have to admit I haven't tried that because, frankly, I'm not a masochist, at least not on weekdays. The system is buggy enough as it is without filling it with a whole Windows OS that can only nowadays be described as pure malware. Instead, I wanted to focus this review on the Steam Deck for what it was intended to run as, a portable SteamOS gaming machine, not a generic cyberdeck. So clearly I can't test every game in the Steam library, but I will run you through some of the things that I've tried and that have caught my attention. First up, as is seemingly tradition for Valve hardware, Valve developed a free demo for the system called Aperture Desk Job. And this really is just designed to test out the controls of the system, though it's not locked to the deck hardware, so if you really want to, you could download it for the PC too. It's nothing amazing, but it's kind of funny, and it really shows off the incredible gyroscopic aiming system, which turns out is really effective, much better than just joysticks. Horizon Zero Dawn is not something I've played before. In fact, I bought it specifically to test out on this, but I have since been playing it on my full gaming PC too. It runs beautifully on the deck, and for me is one of the standout games so far. Playing it without distraction on the Steam Deck really gives you a more intimate experience with the story that I don't think I normally get on a bigger screen or when there's sort of life's distractions around. I also tried out Mini Motorways. I mean, it's such an ubiquitous title now on smartphones and Nintendo Switch too. But if I'm honest, I'm not a fan of the control scheme here. I really want my mouse back, and I found it pretty frustrating on this. You can, in fact, use your finger on the touchscreen, but like I say, it's a bit clunky and very difficult to trace exact paths. So that's probably one that I'll be uninstalling. I just don't think it works that well on here. I also found out that Titanfall 2 actually works great on here. It's a yellow tick application. And that's really my multiplayer of choice. I only stopped playing recently because it was subject to constant server attacks, but that seems to have settled down now, and I was easily able to jump back into multiplayer. Now, despite needing some initial DirectX installs and the Origin client, it does in fact run fine. It doesn't even require user input or tweaks to set it up. It just takes a while to download those extra bits and for the Steam Deck to then configure itself. But after that, it'll work great. You don't need to log into Origin or anything like that. The only thing I will say though is that even though I'm used to playing on an Xbox controller, it definitely took me a while to get used to these sticks and triggers. They do feel a little bit clunky. The D-pad for me feels like it's in the wrong place. The ergonomics are not perfect. I mean, it's not so bad that I would consider connecting an external Xbox controller, although you can do that, by the way, because Bluetooth works great. But for games that are highly competitive, you might find yourself a little bit hobbled until you're used to it. Titanfall 2 is also one of those games that really taxes the battery, so I got less than 2 hours multiplayer with this. Okay, so before we go on to talking more about the battery life, I want to talk about cloud saves. Another one of the more amazing aspects of the Steam Deck is that for games that utilize the cloud save feature, your game will be synced automatically. Assuming that you're online, of course, this works really well. Now, this isn't a feature unique to the Steam Deck by any means. It's been a part of the Steam ecosystem for a while now, but I think most of us don't generally have multiple gaming PCs, so we haven't made so much use of that. So the way it works is that you can finish up your game on the Steam Deck, go over to your gaming PC and pick up exactly where you left off, or vice versa. Like I said, and in case it's not obvious, you will need to be online for this to work. So if you're heading out, then be sure to briefly start the game in online mode so it downloads the game state. Head out, then once you've saved within the game, come home again and put the Steam Deck back online again and wait for it to upload and sync those files again. It's not as seamless as I'd like. For instance, if you put the deck to sleep before it's finished uploading, it won't complete and you may get cloud sync errors. If that happens, the best fix I found was to swap out to desktop mode, completely shut down Steam, then reload and resync from the standard desktop app, which you can access from the Linux desktop here. Generally though, it worked great. You just need to be careful that you don't run out of power in the middle of a game, say. It could certainly be better, but for me, this is one of the biggest selling points of the system. So there are big questions, of course, around the battery life. Internally, the 40 watt hour battery provides anywhere from 1.5 to 4 hours of use in my experience. You can cap the refresh rate to get better battery life. When uncapped and playing Horizon Zero Dawn, I found that I could get only 1.5 hours at most, albeit in glorious 60 frames a second most of the time. But when capped at 30 frames a second, the minimum went up to 2 hours, which I think is a fair compromise. Mini Motorways, on the other hand, was closer to 3-4 hours. So, of course, more demanding games, those with vast open worlds, 3D rendering, will use more of the processor and eat up more of the battery, as will Wi-Fi usage. Like I said, Titanfall 2, when playing online, again, that went down to 1.5 hours, even with it capped at 30 frames a second. Now, there are also some other settings that you can tweak to extend the life, things like limiting the GPU clock. But to be honest, for me at that point, it's a little bit too much faff and a bit of a diminishing return. So like I say, I kept it capped at 30 frames a second, and that's the balance that I'm comfortable with. I don't want to tweak it too much more. For me, a solid 2 hours in any game is more than enough, and I'm never that far from a charging point. So, speaking of which, the system ships with a USB-C 45 watt charger, though when off, it only seems to charge at a maximum of 20 watts. The full 45 watts is reserved for when charging and gaming simultaneously. If you have it plugged in like this to an external monitor over USB-C, in this case a compatible monitor by InnoCN, then it does also charge and transmit the video at the same time. Now, it does preserve power very well during sleep mode, so you aren't going to turn it on and find, whoops, it lost all the power overnight. But it's kind of to the point that it's actually a bit frustrating if you're trying to download a game. I guess I'm used to devices that have a sort of smart sleep mode, whereby they'll download updates while you're not using them, and they're otherwise asleep, which is something the Steam Deck doesn't actually do. It literally goes to sleep. So if you carelessly press the off or the sleep button on the top while you're waiting to download the 70 gigabytes of Horizon Zero Dawn, you may turn it on a few hours later to find you're actually no closer to downloading it at all. And I guess this leads us neatly onto the big downside to having a full PC in a portable miniature form like this. And that's that it does in fact come with all the baggage of being a full PC that runs the Steam platform. There are constant updates, sometimes slow install procedures. Cloud Sync sometimes doesn't work and you have to drop down to the Linux desktop. Even worse, it gives you a threatening message that you might lose all your saved data if you continue. Or even worse than that, you might actually lose all your saved data. There's also different Proton driver versions which you can select, and you'll have to look up on ProtonDB which one is best for your game. And okay, you can minimize that last one if you stick to games that are sort of 100% verified. But my point is that this can at times feel almost as un-user-friendly as an actual PC can. So should you buy the Steam Deck? Don't buy it for your kids to pick up and play for 20 minutes at a time. It is very much not a Nintendo Switch. It's not as user-friendly, it's not as quick to get into some action. Cloud save syncs can be awkward. It's just not as neat and tidy and well packaged. Do, however, buy this if you want a powerful, great value gaming PC that you can play in the car while your kids are at soccer practice. And pick up where you left off on your gaming PC later that evening. Even hook it up to your living room TV. Do buy it because you have already a vast Steam library of games that you've been meaning to get around to play. You've just never had the time to do it. Do buy it if you want something that's a bit hackable. A complete Linux machine, a cyberdeck at your fingertips, the potential for which is as yet unrealized. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope I helped you to make up your mind about whether the Steam Deck is right for you. Do hit like and consider subscribing for more reviews like this and the occasional giveaway. Speaking of which, we are in fact launching a giveaway for 2 of these enormous 40-inch InnoCN gaming monitors in the next week or 2. I'm just saying you might want to subscribe so that you don't miss that. Until next time.